This is not a sponsored video. Gear review! Ow, fuck! The Canon 5D Mark III is a very significant camera, whether you want to admit it or not. In my humble opinion, Canon really changed the way people use DSLRs with cameras like the 5D Mark II and III, and in many ways they set the tone for the DSLR filmmaking conversation. On a personal level, the 5D Mark III changed my photo and video life completely, but I'll explain that along the way. I picked up the 5D Mark III back in 2014, so I've been shooting on this legend for a very appropriate 5 years. Get it? 5D? 5 years? How about that for some extensive testing? I have a ton of thoughts on the 5D Mark III, so let's just jump into it. But before we commence the jumping, hi, I'm Lou. If you're new here, the way these reviews go is normally I talk about the photos, the videos, and then the ease of use, ergonomics, and controls of the camera along with the more technical stuff. And this is the first video in a 3-part series where I talk about the 5D Mark III, the 6D Mark II, and then which one I think is better for you in 2019. The photos you can make with the 5D Mark III are stunning. To me, the 5D Mark III has some truly brilliant colors. Photos are incredibly malleable too. If you shoot raw, you can seriously do a ridiculous amount of editing to them in Lightroom. Dynamic range is impressive, especially for a camera that was released in 2012. It shoots with today's cameras with ease, unlike some other cameras. But that's for the next video. Focus, Lou. This camera has been all over the place with me. The deserts of Arizona, the rainforests in Costa Rica, Maine? Maine wasn't as exciting as the other places, but I got pretty drunk there with Rebecca, so that was fun too. The 5D Mark III was the camera I used the first time I ever captured the Milky Way. It was the camera that I shot tons of portraits of my friends. It was the camera that went through a 365-day project with me where I shot a photo of Charmander in different spots every day of the year. The camera, it's seen a ton of action with me.
I prefer 3D.
It really is the little things in this camera. The 5D Mark III has a built-in multiple exposure mode, so you can take a picture and use it as a grid for the second or third or however many exposures you're going for in there. You can even import a photo that you've already taken on the memory card and create a double exposure like that. When you're done, it'll save the multiple exposure along with the photos you used to make the multiple exposure, so if you hate it, you still have the source photos to mess around with. That's honestly one of those super cool features that I just don't use often enough in the camera, and as I'm making this video, it's a little reminder. Hey Lou, use that feature, you shithead. The photos I've taken with this camera improved over the years, certainly as I began to push the camera further and take advantage of all of its amazing features. But frankly, the photos are fucking brilliant. I love the images you can make with this camera. The video capability was a large part of the reason why I picked up the 5D Mark III. You see, around that time, I started a pretty big personal project called Cure. The video quality is wonderful, plain and simple. And keep in mind, all the footage you're seeing is completely uncolor graded. This is all straight out of camera. And if you want to see more Cure, be sure to check out Nailed It Network. The link will be in the description. That is the channel where I post all my filmmaking stuff. As I progressed from Cure to more recent films, the 5D Mark III always kept up in terms of performance. The dynamic range rocks, but don't expect raw levels of color correction there. You gotta be close to your target, try and get that exposure where it should be, and you'll be great. If you shoot with that in mind, I doubt you'll come off a shoot bummed about your footage. That said, I will say I have found that the 5D Mark III footage is much more salvageable in the edit than something like the Sony a7S, especially in the highlights. Okay, real talk, the a7S did better than I remembered it, but, you know, The dynamic range is still really good. In terms of video specs by 2019 standards, you might be a little bit bummed out. You're capped out at 30 frames in 1080p. If you're looking for that sweet 60 or the fabled 120p, you're out of luck. You can get that 60 in 720, but come on. The Mark III also lets you choose between IPB and all-eye compression, unlike some other cameras. But in all seriousness, IPB versus all-eye compression just has to do with video bitrate and overall quality of the video. So if you shoot all-eye, you tend to get a little bit higher quality video, with of course the trade-off being larger file sizes. And while we're talking about video features, it's important to keep in mind that there is no focus peaking, there is no zebra patterns, and there is no flip-out screen on the 5D Mark III. Do keep in mind too though, this is the stock Canon firmware. I am aware that Magic Lantern can open up more possibilities, but that's a conversation for another video entirely. I'm just talking about the stock 5D Mark III. But if you do get yourself a 5D Mark III and install Magic Lantern, you'll unlock features like 4K and 3.5K in the experimental build, along with 10-bit video recording and a Canon log-ish RAW profile. But back to the base camera, let's talk about the video autofocus. There isn't any. So now that you've seen some of the photos it can take, you've seen some of the videos it can make, let's talk about the ease of use and ergonomics. I'll start this out easy. This is probably, no, not probably. This is my favorite camera to hold, period. Full stop, baby. This is it, the grip. Oh, the grip is fantastic. It feels so right in my hands. It's a bit of a heavy boy, especially compared to the A7S, but it's rugged. I wouldn't worry about taking this thing out in the rain or the snow. I wouldn't even worry about dropping it, and yes, I have, 3 times to be specific, and it's still golden, the absolute unit. The buttons are laid out so perfectly, everything is right at your fingertips. You want to change the white balance? Boom. You want to change the ISO? Bam. You get it, there's like a button for everything. The LCD screen is fine, it's not a touchscreen though, keep that in mind. And do keep in mind this camera is from 2012, so that's not a huge knock against the camera, it just wasn't a common thing then. The colors are displayed fairly accurately on the LCD screen, but it does not perform very well in bright sunlight. It becomes very difficult to see, and after living with the electronic viewfinder in the Sony A7S for so long, the optical viewfinder in the 5D Mark III just seems like a bummer. Not to mention, in video mode, you can't even use the optical viewfinder because the mirror flips up. This is so sad, but it's not a mirrorless camera, so I'll give it a pass. The OVF is great though, it's huge, it's easy to see through, you have 61 autofocus points in there, and the red illumination is a great indication of focus. Pair that with the single point autofocus selection with the joystick on the back of the camera, and you have a sick setup to crush weddings, portraits, and pretty much every scenario you can think of. This is honestly one of the most useful setups in the camera. I use it every single time I take pictures. It's amazing, in single point autofocus you can use the joystick, select someone's eye, and honestly I'd say 90-95% of the time I'm in sharp focus. It's a really amazing system. In terms of I/O, we have an HDMI out, we have an AV out, we have a USB connection, and of course, the headphone jack. Remember that for later. The camera has dual card slots for those of you who care, which seems to be a hot button issue these days online. It holds one CF and one SD card. You can write to both of them independently, or you can make a data redundancy. The menus are a breeze to use. You could wake me up from an alcohol-induced coma, and I'd still be able to jump in and format a card or change frame rate without hesitation. Some of you might argue that, well Lou, it's just the menu you're most used to, but that is not the case. I've been using the A7S forever now too, and that menu has not become any easier for me, it has not become any better in my opinion, since the day I took it out of the box. Canon just knows menus, they know how to make them intuitive and easy to use. Canon apparently doesn't know how to do 24p and 1080 in their new mirrorless cameras, but damn it, they can make the shit out of a menu. And one of my favorite parts about their menu system is the fact that you can create your own menu. You can go into the custom here and program whatever features you enjoy using frequently, so all the things that I love to use on this camera are in one place. The 5D Mark III is a beast of a camera, even by today's standards. And with the prices sitting around $1,000, give or take, or that one on eBay that's $5,000 for some reason, there are certainly other options in that price point, but the 5D Mark III still stands out, at least to me anyway. And take what I say with a grain of salt, this honestly is a very special and sentimental camera to me. In many ways, it was my first big boy camera, so I might be a little bit biased, but I tried to be as objective as possible. It's rugged, it feels perfect in the hands, it takes phenomenal photos. The video, it works, it leaves something to be desired, but if you're good with no articulating screens, no dual pixel autofocus, you're not going to be disappointed by this camera. But in my world and in my personal use, as I made the jump into this YouTube channel, I needed a camera that could drive itself. I needed a camera that could be more reliable for video, and that is why I picked up the 6D Mark II. We'll talk about that in the next part of this series though. But for now, I'm giving the Canon 5D Mark III 9 Owen Wilson wows out of 10. Alright guys, thank you so much for checking out part 1 of 3. I hope to have the next 2 parts up in the next 2 weeks, that this will be 3 weeks in a row of me blabbing on about Canon DSLRs. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and share this video, get it? That's gonna be my new joke in every video ever. Make sure you hit subscribe, like the video, leave me your thoughts. What do you think? Do you have the Mark III? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let me know what you think below. Follow me on MySpace, join the Discord, hit me on Twitter, Instagram, Horseman's on Instagram. Alright, bye! But don't expect like you're, especially for a camera that 3 back in 2014. Great. How's that? I am aware that Magic Lantern can open up. The colors are displayed fairly accurately, but the LCD does. But if you do grab yourself a. So now that you've seen